Just see if it's streaming. I think I'm gonna spend only 1.5 hours today. I spent the whole day refactoring the code there, so I thought that it wouldn't be like worth it to stream, but I still haven't finished the refactoring and it's getting late, so I wanted to stream at least for some time. So, and it's taking a long ass time because some of these codes is kind of hard to, like, some of them were easy and it works. I refactored them and it worked, but this one was the hardest one, the one that I spent the most time, and I still couldn't. I think I made some mistake. I created the code in a different file because there's a bunch of code, and in the way that it was written is a little bit weird because he was writing with the strings. So when you pass to actual code, I think that there's like some part that I got it wrong because there's a lot of code. So it's this file here, like a lot of different stuff happening. So I think that this one I'm gonna leave it like the way that it is here. And I also realized that I might change this, like all the functions that he's using here, because I might use another engine or yeah, do something else. But I think it's worth refactoring everything because it's a lot easier to understand. I really don't like the way that he did it here, but I think I understand the reason why he did it. It's because if you wanna accept more dimensions, then it seems like I couldn't think about a different way to do it. Like the way that I do it is just putting the conditions here for 2 or 3 dimensions, but to allow an arbitrary number of dimensions, I couldn't think a way to do it because there's a lot of parts in the code where you have to load or initialize variables conditionally based on how many dimensions you have. So the only way to do that, I think, is the way that he did it there with the string, and that's probably the reason why he did it that way. And I also think that it might be possible that in some situations the graph allows for more than 3 dimensions. And the problem is that I still haven't taken the time to understand how the equations are changing the visualization there on the canvas. So it might be possible that in some situations you have something like weight, for example, or pressure or things like that. And this would be like extra dimensions that are not necessarily visual, but they might change the calculations of how the physics engine works. So it might be the case that the way that I'm doing here is not going to work, even though that is working now. Like when I try to change it, it's not going to work. But I think that's not a problem because if that's the case, I might just change all these functions entirely. So I'm just mainly trying to refactor everything so it's easier to understand what's going on. Because it's a lot easier to understand if you have the actual code instead of doing things the way that he did here. The way that he did. Yes, I think this is the last one to refactor. And I might change the event listeners as well. The whole way he did the event listeners with that Eventify library. Because I don't really like his style of coding, let's say. I think like it's very confusing to me. His zone is also short, so it's probably gonna be fast. Let me test to see if it's working. I think I'm not gonna change the other one. Okay, so those work. So I'm not gonna change the or see what is wrong with this one. Let me. Maybe it's because I'm calling the function directly from there, but I think it's the error is something else. I guess I can try to put all of this code directly on the other one. I think it's not gonna change anything. Then I'll have to think about whether or not it's worth it to pass this library locally, or if I should start trying to change, because I'm not really sure if I'm gonna use this. The other thing that I thought about is to just remove the events, the firing events, and see if anything changes. Because I couldn't figure out the receiving listener for the fire event. It does this, but it doesn't update the, and then it breaks the thing. So it's probably something that I did wrong here from the way that it was before. I think I'm gonna leave it like it is here. Not really sure what to do now. See, they're gonna be try to change the event listeners or maybe study VJS, but it's probably better. You study VJS first and then try to incorporate the VJS design, event listener design to this one. And now it probably works, yeah. I think last time I stopped because I stopped when I was trying to understand the animation, the whole cycle of the animation. And I don't think I'm gonna be able to do a lot of things today, so better to just study VJS and then try to change tomorrow, whatever stuff I have to change. And maybe I should search for the events now. I think for this part, like I'm probably gonna read this in the future when I after I changed. Maybe it's better to try to change the event listeners first and then I change this later. But I might have to change this right after because the calculations are probably going to be different, I think. So I need to study the way that VGS does the calculations with their physics engine. Just see, and then I'm probably gonna have to change all of these functions here. First, I think I want to remember where that I saw that event listeners. I think it was somewhere here. It was one that fired, and then I couldn't know if there was any function that was being triggered because of that. I think it wasn't this one, it was something else. I think this one is just gonna create this thing. Yeah, this is the stuff that I wanted to see. So when I do the click, maybe I should console log here somewhere, try to console log. Because when I click it, I can move the camera. So I think I'm gonna try to... So first I think I'm gonna console log here outside, then try to console log inside. And maybe I should change the way that I'm doing the graph there so I don't have to keep sending the data. I think I was doing like this so I can test some stuff. Yeah, but now when I click there, like nothing shows up here. So yeah, and I thought that it didn't make sense here because there's nothing that is listening to this. So let's see if I erase everything here. If it's gonna change anything. Let me remove everything first. It's probably some function that's... Yeah. So it might be the case that the event, at least the thing that makes the canvas move, it's already embedded into the canvas object. Like I don't understand how it's possible that I can move there. I think I'm gonna change the graph so that it always loads a simple graph here instead. So I don't have to keep sending the data. Hmm. It's because I'm not calling the function inside here. Yeah, so I still can move, change. Now let me console log the on mouse move event. So my assumptions were correct. Because it didn't make sense that if I couldn't find the function, like, so I don't understand really well why the functions are here though. Like why put, maybe he was gonna do something with the events, but then didn't do, or he did it on another library, another example, something like that. It's possible. Here's probably doesn't do anything. So obviously the other thing that I can try is to put the on somewhere, api.on, and then see what happens. Yeah, I think that if I put here, like on the sing.on, and then mouse move, then I will be able to console log, and I'm probably gonna receive this as the argument of the function, the event. Yeah, so nothing shows up here. So I'm gonna try to do that, I think. And probably what I'm gonna do is try to change this to be more similar to the way that VJS works. Yeah, now I can see here. Nice. And then it's receiving the whatever object it has there. Yeah, so the thing, I think I understood correctly, but it was just confusing because he had the fire event, but he wasn't using the fire event. But I still don't understand really well, like why does it work when you click and move. It's probably like an event that is embedded with the canvas, so you don't need to create it. So I think what I'm gonna do is just study VJS now. I think the next thing that I'm gonna do. So first, I think I have to understand how the animation is done on VJS, like how the feedback loop system works, to make the graph more dynamic. And then after I understand that, I think I'm gonna try to change the way that it is here. But now that I see that, like, it seems that it's gonna be very easy. I thought it would be more complicated because I didn't understand how it works really well. Because it was just weird that it's firing events here, but there's nowhere where it's receiving the events. But I might change as well, I think. It might be better to just try to adapt everything here to work in the same way that VJS works. But I think first I need to understand the feedback loop of VJS, and then after that I try to understand how the events work, and then integrate the way that events work. But yeah, I think before that's I'm probably gonna have to spend a lot of time trying to understand how the physics calculations work. I think that's the hardest part to understand. So like right now, after studying the VJS, to study the animation loop, I'm gonna have to understand how the physics engine works on VJS, and then I'm gonna have to incorporate that physics engine on my stuff here. So I think I'm gonna close all these files for now, and I'm probably gonna have to change all of these files that I changed just now. First, I have to understand how all these calculations work, why they are the way that they are. And then I have to compare them with the VJS calculations, and then try to incorporate the VJS functions into this one. And I think I can delete this. I actually can't delete this because I didn't change the quad tree here file. Also, maybe I should try to remove the library first, the forest layouts, to see if it's working. Or it's using the node modules one. And maybe I should, before I do anything, I should try to pass all of these other libraries into local ones. But I think it's probably better to try to study the animation of VJS first, because there might be a lot of functions that I change anyway, and then I stop using the library, so... Okay, so it works. Did I change the wrong files there? I think I did. I didn't because this one is from the. If I changed to the wrong files, it would stop working when I deleted the module. Yeah, so I think I changed the correct ones. We're gonna remove all these files that are from the project because they don't matter to me. So maybe they're gonna fuck up the graphs though. Huh. This is interesting. So one of these files might contain the code that creates the options that I couldn't find. Because in the library in the site they have examples. Like this file here. It's here. Samples physics. Nice. Yeah, but the issue is that it's gonna use the CDN or this stuff here. And this one has all the code already parsed, so it's a lot harder to understand what's going on. Let's chew up 3. And maybe I don't have the file here. Yeah, but this is helpful because here now that I can go and investigate on the code. Like I wanna figure out how it creates this stuff here because I wanna understand how, like exactly what functions are being triggered when you change here to recreate the same effect. So it's inside of options and then configure, filter. It's gonna be a function. I know this is the div because of the Jinja template. Interesting. This probably checks to see if the stuff that you passed into the objects, into the options object is valid. So it has one of the, or all the configurations are allowed. So I know based on this that from the initialization here, it has to work. So there's some code inside of this file here that should use this container instead of this configure in the options to create the element there, I think, to create this thing here. Let me see if this is the same page. But the problem is I don't have the file, I think. Yeah, so it doesn't work. I don't have this standalone. But it should be the same, I think. As it is this thing here. But it's weird that it doesn't have, even in this project, it doesn't have the path here. The files that are necessary, this standalone file. There's 3 directories up. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. There's no standalone here, and there's no standalone there, so. Maybe if I replace with this one, it's gonna work. Yeah, there we go. So it is the same there. So based on this, it has to create the whatever is inside of this config here, which is the stuff that I want to understand. Like how to recreate this box here that has all the configuration. So it's a div that is created and appended inside of this thing here. So this makes things a lot easier because I was spending a bunch of time trying to see on the developer on this thing here, how is this thing done? Because I couldn't figure out where the page was from. But now I just realized, like, as I was looking there, I realized that is the path from the repository, the URL from the example. So it's gonna make things a lot easier because now I know that this is the function that is being called. So when you create this class, it has to somehow at some point create that div and append to this one here. So I just need to figure out where's the part of the code that does that. And then I can try to recreate that on my own thing there. But I think also as I try to understand that, I'm going to try to understand how the animation cycle is created on this one. So I can try to incorporate on the one that I'm doing. So I think the file that creates this should have this class name because the div has this class name. You should search for this thing here. Configurator. I remember looking at this as well. So this is the thing. I think I've seen this before, and I suspected that this was the thing that created, but I wasn't sure. So now I think it's very likely. It has to be this thing that creates the stuff there, the component. Maybe it's a waste of time to try to change the stuff that I have there for the event listeners. It's gonna be pretty much the same thing. It's a lot easier to just copy the stuff. Like all I have to do is just put these events on the stuff that I have there, on the scene. So like the scene is the equivalent for the network here. And then I can I can add a bunch of different functions on this network, which in the other case is gonna be the create scene here. There's gonna be this function here, which is a class. So all I have to do is incorporate the stuff here, and then after this eventify is used, I can just call the event listeners there. You just set up all these event listeners on the other function outside there. This function here. Or I can do it on the same file. Maybe that's better because it's the way that they are doing here as well. So I can use this prototype as well for the other function there. I can pretty much just copy and do exactly the same. Then just change this should be done on the API instead of the emitter. But maybe actually it's better to just do it the way that they are doing here. The thing that's gonna be confusing is how it works on the other files, because that function returns an API, returns all of this stuff that exists on the API. So maybe it's better to create a class instead, and then like you don't return the class, because yeah, let me think. I think what I'm gonna end up doing is just convert everything. I think that's better. It works pretty much in the same way, I think. But the Vue.js uses classes, and the graph uses this, like it returns the API here, which is this eventify object here. So what I would have to do differently is just change the syntax here, and then instead of putting the functions inside of this one, I would put it inside of the prototype. Yeah, just make the name of the function, and then puts there. The only thing is this part here where it sends this into the other function. It's kind of like inheritance here when it's passing this to this one. I'm trying to think if I can do, like if I can just change the eventify, but it still remain with the functions without changing the syntax here. I think I can, but Not sure if it's better or worse. Maybe it's better. I think the syntax doesn't matter, but what probably does matter and it's probably better, like if I can change. So instead of this camera control using the API, instead of being like this, the camera controller accepting or receiving the API as an argument here, which the API would be like the class for this function here. So it contains like, it's pretty much exactly the same way that the class works, but instead of doing a class, he's creating an object and passing the object inside of this eventify. And then he's passing this thing here inside of this. So it's like the create map controls is inheriting the create scene class. It's like very similar. So, but I think it would be better if instead of doing that, I did more in the way that the VGS there is, where like this would be a separate class. But maybe it's the same thing at the end of the day. Like here in the initialization. Like the controller would be like one of these classes here. The map controls. Yeah, so here it passes the body and the canvas. I think that's the main difference here, is that on this one is passing everything through this thing here to initialize this. It passes all the functions that it has here. But on the other one is like it's only passing the GL here, which is the canvas context. Maybe the better approach is just to try to emulate the exactly the same way that it is here. So change the stuff to a class, then put all the functions separately from the class and use prototype instead of doing the whole eventify thing. I think that's what I'm gonna probably do. But then if I do things like that in that way, then I have to change to see how to change. I think that I'm gonna try to change this create map controls to be exactly the same way that the view is here. It's probably very similar. The only difference is gonna be that the map controls use the WebGL calculations, so I'm gonna have to change that, but I can just copy everything from this one here. I guess the other difference is that this one, like everything's coupled together, like the graphs, the nodes and the edges are part of this class, and in the one that I have, you can create the graph outside. You create the graph outside and then you use that to create the scene. So that's another difference. So, yeah. Like, I think maybe it would be better to, instead of doing these functions here, to pass these functions inside of this one. I'm also gonna have to download this library locally because this one I didn't do it yet. I'm trying to think, like, why did he put us separately? And I think that the reason why is probably because from the stuff that I've seen on the documentation about the end graph is that he wanted first he created another library that was more, everything was more coupled together, and then he wanted to separate things to allow people to have flexibility in the way that they use the libraries. I think that's the reason why these functions here are separated from the create scene, because you might want to use the create scene for building other types of graphs. But I think that for my case specifically, where I'm only gonna do networks, probably, it's probably better to just, instead of making these functions here, I can put everything inside of this class here. And then I can maybe separate like into different, I create main functions here inside of this class and then separate them into other files that handle different parts of the graph. Yeah, but then the more that I think about it, actually it's probably better to, I was gonna say that I don't need to use this graph library, because I can do everything that he did here, but it's probably better to just reuse the function that he used. Like, I'm not really sure, I'm already tired today, so. But I think it might be a good idea to put these graph functions inside of this create scene here, and then just redo the way that everything's being rendered here or created. So that the functions, instead of the loops going in the graph, they would go in this scene, and then this wouldn't be the scene anymore. It would be like the same way that Vjazz is. Then it would be like a network class. And then so that way I can initialize the network first, and then I can mix together the functions that add nodes and links with the stuff on the scene. I think that might be better to, because it's probably better to do it like that, to update the graph in like real time. Because then if you make it as the same, like both functions as the part of the class, then when you update the graph, maybe it's possible to do some calculations. It's easier to do some calculations that change the graph in interesting ways, the scene in interesting ways. But obviously you can do it both ways, I think. But I'm not really sure, like, what are the implications of the two different types of approaches. Like one, you separate the graph from the scene, and the other one, you put them together. I think for the stuff that I'm trying to do, it's probably, it's going to become more rigid, and that's the problem, because you lose flexibility. Like in the future, let's say I don't want to do graphs anymore, or I want to do some other type of visualization, then I have, like, I would have to load all the stuff that is related to networks anyway to render the scene. That's the problem, but I'm not. Yeah, I think that's, I'm not gonna do anything that is different from a graph, probably. And what would be the advantage of putting them together? That's the other thing to think about. I think the advantage, it might be that it is easier to update the graph if I put the scene and the functions of the graph together. I think that's probably, yeah, I think that probably makes it worth it to put everything together, because that way I can put probably one function inside of the scene that, as you add nodes, it updates the scene with this stuff here. I need to understand better how it's keeping track of the lines. I think, yeah, it's keeping track based on the stuff that it has on the scene. It's appending here after it creates. Where is it? Yeah, so it's keeping track inside of this thing here. Yeah, maybe right now it doesn't make a lot of difference, but as I add all of this stuff, I think it's gonna be easier if I move everything inside of the, if I change the create scene to a class, and then I add all of the, I merge together the functions that create the graph with the functions from this scene. So maybe I take the source code and then I just make the nodes and the graph creation part of the scene itself. So that way I create more in the way that VJS is, where when you create here, it creates the, like you pass the nodes and the edges and the container. And then I think that I should probably do that. And it's gonna be easier to translate everything to from VJS to that if I do it like this, as I scale and incorporate everything. So that's probably the first thing that I'm gonna do tomorrow. It's gonna be annoying, I think. Yeah, but first I have to. I think I already have the library for the graph, yeah, and graph locally, and then I'll extract all the functions that I have there, and yeah, but this one it also receives the nodes from here and the edges from outside. Yeah, but I probably will emulate whatever it does here. And so maybe I don't need to incorporate I keep the nodes and edges separately, and then I do the way that it is here. The other stuff so the stuff that exists on this file, this file, I pass inside of the create scene. Then I'll download this library locally and pass everything here to there, and then I keep the graph separately. The creation of the nodes and edges. And then these are just gonna be methods in the same way that this one has a bunch of methods as well. Not methods, classes. So I put these dots, line collections, and then just create here. I think the problem is that this one is from the visutil, and I couldn't find visutils. And I couldn't find the library. Look at this thing here as well. Yeah, it's from this thing here. And the configurator is the same thing. It's from that library, I think. But I think that I figure out where it is from. Like this, it is from here, but I'm not 100% sure because it's not from the same folder that it says it is there. So there it says that it is from the ESNax, but here there isn't any ESNax folder. But I think it should be these functions here. So let me look at the activator first. almost 100% sure that this is the class that creates this component here. But it's a little bit confusing. It's hard to understand how it does it. Yeah, so I think if you spend some time, you're gonna understand how it works. So it's probably gonna be a lot easier than I thought it would be. So I think that this function here creates all of the boxes in the same way. So it creates the components for the box, and then depending on what option it is gonna attach a different event listener or a different function. So I think the main thing that I have to understand here is how is it setting up the function that is gonna run when this changes. I think that's the main thing. And once I understand that, I can go and explore how the function works to change the simulation. I think what I might do as well, probably tomorrow, I'll like try to understand first how, like it in the simple example, how it initializes the animation, and then try to incorporate that in the way that I'm doing there on the other one. So first change everything to a class and do the stuff that I talked about, and then after that, try to incorporate as few or as little things as possible from this one into the other one, so that the one that I have is more like a static thing, in the same way that VGS, it's more like a dynamic thing, in the same way that VGS is. So you need to understand how the physics engine structures the thing. It's probably gonna be Probably gonna have to explore on the layouts class here. The problem is that there's a bunch of different classes, but I think the layout engine is the one that like configures the stuff in the beginning. I think I've seen the event here as well. Like there's an event for starting the animation. So probably investigate that first. Yeah, this event here. Start simulation. The difficult part is figuring out where what function is triggered by the event. But it's probably gonna be the physics engine, and then the physics engine probably gonna call the layout or whatever. Yeah, this is definitely the class that creates the thing there. Because I remember seeing all these function names as well when I was going with the developer tools, trying to figure out. So I'm gonna study more this thing here. So yeah, I'm probably gonna stop here, and then tomorrow I'm gonna do the stuff that I said that I was gonna do to start changing this. Probably download this library here, then change this to a class instead of the function, and then remove the eventify library, and like I'm gonna try to copy as much as I can from Vue.js to do this exact same structure from Vue.js because I think it's a better structure. But the positive side of this one is that it is faster and it uses WebGL. So I wanna like put as many things as I can from Vue.js into this one, but use this one because this one is faster instead of using Vue.js. And then maybe I'll see in the future as well to see if I can incorporate 3JS to do the in 3D. That would be cool as well, I think. Yeah, but I want to get to the point where I have like the exact same graph. Not the exact same, but pretty similar from the way that it works here with Vue.js. I want to get to this point where I'm doing this from the library that I have there, then graph, and the WGL stuff. Yeah, so we'll probably come back tomorrow, continue to do this. So